We'll demonstrate now the post-fall procedure in managing a resident. So if a resident's on the floor, we'll make sure that we check the immediate area for danger. After that, we'll check the resident for a response, making sure that they are responsive, after which point, if they are responsive, we'll send for help. This is reasonably easy in a care environment. There'll be nurse call systems or buzzers available to direct a registered nurse to attend. From that point, the RM will follow a clinical incident pathway, making sure that they complete a head-to-toe check, and will assess for injuries. If there is no injuries, we'll make sure that we reassure the resident or the consumer and gather the appropriate equipment to assist the resident from the floor. That appropriate equipment is a mechanical lifting device. In this case, it's a pivot frame full sling hoist and a GP or general purpose sling with head support. We'll instruct the resident to roll to one side. We'll physically assist where required, and we'll position the sling over the top of the resident, making sure we've got the correct or the inside against the resident's body. To position, we'll make sure the arch of the leg strap is at the top of the bottom crease. This will ensure the correct positioning once they're supported by the sling. When that key position is met, the top of the GP sling with head support should be at the top of the resident's head. Always follow the care plan or service plan with using the correct size equipment. We'll then roll to the other side using standardised rolling techniques to unravel the sling, and then we'll position it over the top of the resident's body, once again checking that key measuring point being the arch of the leg straps to the top of the bottom crease. When that's at the key position, the top of the head support of the sling should be at the top of the resident's head. We'll then roll the resident onto their back to enable positioning of the leg straps underneath the thighs. They're positioned nice and smoothly to minimise any risk of skin tears or pinching of the skin as the hoist is raised. And the leg straps should be roughly even. If the resident is consistent and compliant, we'll ask them to hold the leg straps. If the resident, conversely, is not consistent or compliant, the therapist and assistant will assist by supporting and securing those leg straps. We'll position the hoist in as close as possible to the resident to ensure that when the boom lowers down over the resident, there's minimal distance between the connecting straps and the connectors of the pivot frame. You'll see to get access close to the resident, we've had to spread the base legs of the hoist sufficiently to allow the boom to lower down directly over the resident. One of the therapists will always hold on to the boom of the hoist and the pivot frame to avoid it moving around, potentially swinging, or a risk of skin tears to the resident or the colleagues. The boom will be lowered, trying to line up the shoulder connectors as the first point of contact, and making sure we lower the mechanical device down, once again to minimise the distance between the connectors and the pivot frame. The connectors on the sling will be attached to the pivot frame, making sure that when they're connected we hear the audible click to make sure that they're locked on. Once the shoulders are locked on, we use the pivot frame functionality to connect the leg straps. We will always check our connectors to make sure they're secure, and we'll cross-check our partners to make sure they are secure as well, to minimise any risk of the straps dislodging during transfer. From this position, we'll start to raise the boom of the hoist, making sure that the brakes are not locked on, so they remain off, and the hoist will centre itself over the centre of gravity. One of the staff will make sure they look after the lower limbs of the resident or consumer, making sure they don't catch on any of the environmental objects or base legs that are in the transfer area, whilst the other carer or staff member will be operating the mechanical lifting device. Once the resident is hoisted to a sufficient height, We'll close the base legs to facilitate manoeuvrability, and one of the staff members will facilitate directional guidance, while the other staff member will make sure that they apply force in a forward direction only to reach the destination. Once over the destination, we'll make sure we adjust the position of the bed to provide comfort and support as we lower the resident from the hoist onto the bed. In this case, we're going to raise the head of the bed to match the semi-reclined positioning of the client in the sling. As the boom is lowered, once again the brakes remain off the mechanical lifting device as we lower the client or the resident onto the bed. We continue to lower the boom until all the pressure is off all of the connectors, being the shoulder and the hips. And you can see here the pressure's now come off, the sling goes slack. From this position, each staff member or therapist will unclick the straps of the sling from the pivot frame, the shoulders first and then proceeding to the legs. You'll note that one staff member always has a hand on the pivot frame to minimise any risk of the pivot frame swinging or spinning around, which may be a risk of skin tears or injuries to the resident or consumer. The mechanical lifting device is removed from the transfer area and the bed is adjusted to facilitate a rolling technique to remove the sling from underneath the resident. The leg straps are removed from underneath the resident and the leg straps are then tucked underneath the body of the general purpose sling. The bed height is adjusted to a working height that's appropriate for both staff members. And the sling is then rolled up onto each side. Standardised rolling technique is utilised to roll the resident on their slide, and the sling is rolled up underneath itself. This will enable it to be removed when the resident rolls back to the other side and avoid any loose straps getting caught or risk of skin tears in removing the sling. Instruct the client that they'll roll over a slight lump where the sling is, roll onto their back, and then they'll roll back to the other side after repositioning the lower limbs to facilitate the roll to the opposite direction. And the sling should be free to enable removal. Ensure the privacy, dignity and comfort of the resident once the sling's removed by lowering the bed, ensuring that the call buzzer is within reach, and follow all other directed care.